like to welcome you all to joining us for today's webinar. I think a number of you have attended Pimento webinars in the past. For those that don't know me, my name is Stephen Knight. I'm the CEO and founder of Pimento. We are a network of some 6,500 marketing professionals, agencies and consultants, both in the UK and overseas. And we work exclusively with brands and businesses to help you find the right agency partner or partners. And we do it for free. There you go. There's the ad over. We will be recording today's session, so please do turn your cameras on, smile throughout, and remember to use the chat box, which is at the bottom, if you want to ask any questions of our illustrious panel. And as always, we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So please do feel free to ask questions as we get into today's session. And don't be afraid to put your hand up also, which you can do so. So today is all about a deep dive into the world of luxury marketing. The UK sector is changing with a real sort of shift in demographics, digital first shoppers, and a growing demand for sustainability and personalisation. Certainly the younger generations are placing more demands on luxury brands, helping to redefine what they mean by exclusivity, pushing heritage brands to innovate more quickly. And at the same time, obviously, the luxury sector has had a pretty tough time of it. We've been experiencing major headwinds. Growth has slowed. There have been, shall we say, price-led strategies prevailing for the last 12 months or so. And the consumer trust in some sectors has begun to weaken as a result. As I say, we've got a fantastic panel, all of whom come from the world of luxury, oodles of experience, both from the brand side and from the agency side. We have Leslie Davey with us. Some of you know Leslie from our previous events and activities. She has had a classical marketing education, working for brands like Diageo, Unilever, the Coca-Cola Company, IHG and Brevik. And for the last decade, she's acted as an advisor to CEOs, executives and trusted boards across a wide range of organizations, developing their strategies, building teams and marketing competencies. And she's also inevitably in her journey across brands worked with luxury brands like Nye Timber and most recently as the brand director for the Macallan. Helen Brocklebank is the chief executive of Walpole, the official sector body for British luxury, and they represent some 250 leading brands, contributing 81 billion to the UK economy. And since 2007, she has leveraged her deep sector experience to spearhead initiatives like the British Luxury Sustainability Manifesto, developing industry building programs like Brands of Tomorrow, and campaigning for recognition and protection of the luxury brand sector, both at Westminster and at Brussels. She's a board member of the European Culture and Creative Industries Alliance. She also serves as the Department for Business and Trades Advisory Group on Manufacturing and Consumer Goods. And prior to her time at Walpole, she was in the world of publishing with roles at Harper's Bazaar, Esquire, and Elle. Crispin Butler is the Director of Marketing Communication at Fortnum & Mason's, my favourite store. He is responsible for a wide range of communications across advertising, partnerships, PR, retail, events and hospitality. Prior to his life at Fortnum, he was agency side, working at Y&R. He then moves on to AMV, where he worked across key accounts including Mars, PepsiCo, Sainsbury's, Walkers, Aviva and Guinness. And then Michael Mazinski, who's been with Pimento now for nearly 18 of the last 20 years, graduated from the London School of Economics and spent 20 years working with the Saatchi brothers, running major global accounts and establishing M&C Saatchi offices in Hong Kong, New York and London. In 2008, he founded London Advertising. The agency's work has now run in more countries than WPP has offices, and London has named Agents of the Year 6 times in the past 7 years. Over his career, he's worked on many luxury brands, including British Airways, on their Concorde and First Class brands, Silversea, the Peninsula Hotel Group, Wedgwood, and John Lobb. He initiated the fan campaign for Mandarin Oriental and ran it for some 25 years, and it was featured with over 100 of the world's most famous people, all of whom appeared without payment. So there you have it. I have to say, I think probably our strongest lineup across the whole of the year. Really important subject, and we've obviously got lots of attention, and thank you to all of you for joining us. We're going to start, if I may, by a question to Helen. Really, in the last 2 years, we've seen a fairly sort of fraught luxury market in the UK, and not just in the UK. But has it taught us very much about the resilience of brands in the luxury sector in terms of pricing and their limitations on growth?
Well, I think we've just come off the back of the British Luxury Awards on Monday, where we were, celebrating some really extraordinary achievements of brands that continue to grow. I think the global picture has been a tightening of luxury. It's a global market of 1.48 trillion euros, but in the UK, it's been incredibly strong and incredibly resilient. So, even globally, luxury. Luxury slowdown needs to be put in context. It's still a sector that, despite uh, all the headlines, has been growing globally at 4-5%, which is not bad if we think of all the conversations we read about growth generally. And actually, British luxury grows annually at an average rate of 11%. So it is a high growth sector. I think luxury is changing. Certainly, what we're looking at when we look at some of the global studies and talk to consumers is that consumers about 71% of consumers feel that luxury is not what it was before the pandemic. We always think things aren't what they used to be, and it is changing. Luxury consumers, and whether that goes for Gen Z as well as it does for boomers, they want to buy into brands, and they want to buy into brands that get them. It can't any longer be a kind of top-down conversation where you're on the receiving end of beautiful broadcast messages from kind of very kind of distant brands. It has to be, you want to be a community. So that kind of dialogue between customers is the major shift. But I see and a kind of dialogue of discerning equals. But what I see when I look at what's happening with British luxury brands is that growth is coming from brands that get that right, where they are the commodification challenges of some of the very, very big brands don't exist so much in the UK. So there's a real shift back to qualities that we would describe as true luxury. So craftsmanship, quite niche, handmade, made to last, utility, but quality, utility and beauty together, which is something that UK luxury brands do brilliantly. Kind of seduction, rarity, timelessness, and heritage. This idea that the timeliness of timelessness has come back is, I think, a response to a world that feels quite scary. Luxury brands, we look at Fortnum & Mason and the Macallan, represents a kind of, this is an enduring nature of beautiful value, something that recognizes you as a special discerning individual. So a really clear set of values, then you will drive growth, but you have to work harder in this market. It isn't an easy market. The growth is still there. And we look at the brands that won on Monday, they were brands that were quite under the radar. So Gusbourne, English sparkling wine, took away British Luxury Brand of the Year, voted for by all of its peers. Swain, which is a brand that's been going since 1798, and it's kind of hats and umbrellas and bags, all handcrafted in London and Leicestershire. So those Sanderson Design, those kinds of kind of very low key brands, but they stand for all of those things that I'm talking about. So growth is there, but you have to play harder and you have to play as an equal with a customer.
Thank you, Helen. Balancing that, Leslie, is what you deal day in, day out with the Macallan, getting that kind of balance between that sort of deep heritage, whilst making sure from a modernity point of view, it's relevant to today's consumer. How do you both preserve the traditions of the brand and at the same time reinvent it?
Mm-hmm. At Macallan, we love to balance heritage with modernity or innovation. This is because the brand heritage itself is based on incomparable craftsmanship and authenticity and creativity, and these are timeless notions. And they are really at the heart of everything that we do. So if you take, for instance, last year we celebrated 200 years with the Macallan, and the way that we brought this to life was with time, space, and time, space mastery, which are absolutely unique expressions of the brand, because we combine the youngest and the oldest whiskey of the distillery in a round bottle with two separate vessels. And that is the celebration of the 100th anniversary in a very, very different way. But also ongoing, the way that we partner with artists around the world. We have just engaged with David Carson, one of the most celebrated designers, to reimagine and create a new identity for the Macallan, which is on our packaging. If you think about our distillery and how it has an absolute breakthrough design with its ondulation, all the way in how the Macallan is encouraging its new serves and cocktails in completely new ways to elevate the character that the brand has and this signature taste. So it really is part of everything that we do, because we are completely centered in incomparable craftsmanship and authenticity. So that gives us an opportunity to embrace everything that represents those values.
This sense of kind of heritage at the same time needing that modernity to appeal to new audiences and to continue to stay relevant is at the kind of core of what you're doing there. When I think a little bit about the shift also in overt demonstrations of luxury, and I can come to you, Crispin. I mean, the kind of quiet luxury movement we talk about, a style that's sort of prioritizing quality craftsmanship and timelessness over sort of flashy logos, and overtly, sharing the brand on your wrist, whatever. Do you think that's a genuine reset, or is it purely a passing aesthetic?
I think it's always been there, to be honest. I think if you look back at sort of almost aristocratic luxury, of course there were, in times gone by, there were vast displays of wealth, but the aristocratic attitude of sort of make, do, and mend, and finding the best materials for the job exists, and you can still see that now, I think. So I think it's always been there. There's a very outmoded but still quite instructive quote around gentlemen should only ever inherit their furniture and jewelry, and I think that sort of speaks to that kind of aesthetic that exists. But then I think it's always been there. I think everyone will know this, but in times of immense growth, sometimes you do get very flashy examples of luxury. I put into AI what the definition of luxury was just before this, and it says a state of great comfort or elegance, especially when involving great expense. And I think I agree with the first bits, but less so the great expense thing, because I think what we are seeing, especially when you come to younger audiences, is a real interest in the materiality of things, a real interest in the longevity of things that don't need to be expensive, but can be, as you say, Stephen, quiet luxuries that help get people through their day, like some really nice tea or some really nice jam. It doesn't need to cost a fortune, but it's the best iteration of that you can buy. So I don't think it's a passing thing at all. I think it follows economic trends. So obviously in the 80s, there was a little bit more flash than the late 90s after the financial crash. But I think it's always there. And I think if you know your audience and you know who you're talking to and what's interesting to them, that can unveil a really strong seam of product development and storytelling that doesn't have to be flash. And that's what we try to do a lot of at Fortnum's.
Because I think that leads on to the discussion we had previously about the wonderful Fortnum and Mason jam being sort of affordable luxury. And it's not just the quality of the ingredients and the craftsmanship that goes into making it. It's the retail experience of walking into a Fortnum store and getting that beautiful Christmas display in the windows, meticulous service. And I think, because when you're only selling jam online, you wouldn't get the value or the price point that you do when people walk into the store. And my view of that luxury, which is whether you talk about extravagance of cost, is actually it's the dispelling of the price point as a barrier to purchase, because you just want it and it's a great experience, and people only buy something they value, so it's good value. I don't need the price point jam, it's £9.50. I know I can get it for £1.99 in Tesco, but it's a much more rich experience, and the jam will be, I believe, a higher quality. So all of the things that have been built up around the heritage of that brand, as well as no brand can stay the same. It has to have continuous innovation to keep up with what's happening else in the market, what's happening with competitors. So I think luxury is always there, and it's something that by its nature is exclusive. It excludes people, because if you can only afford £1.99 for a pot of jam, you won't go to Fortnum's. And I think it's how, as marketeers, we help build that image around the brand that sustains that evaporation of the price point.
I mean, on that point, the kind of balance between experience versus product. Have we seen a shift, do you think, Helen? I mean, are luxury brands now much more about the experience than they are about the product? You spoke about the quality, you spoke about the attention to detail, you spoke about the craftsmanship, but very much, the experience, both pre, during, and post sale, are increasingly becoming important, aren't they? Particularly for the Gen Zs.
I think it's fun. I mean, experience is fundamental to the promise of luxury. I love this idea that experience is the great new trend in luxury, because actually it's also the great old trend in luxury. It's, I mean, as Michael was saying, it's, your joy in buying something. I'm going to Fortnum Mason. It is, you can buy a packet of tea pigs in Sainsbury's and shove it in your cart as you're just, walking around in a really dispirited way. Or you can go to Fortnum Mason for a very similar price. You are having an extraordinarily joyful, beautiful time. You're talking to experts with really deep knowledge about tea, who can help you find the very tea that will answer your tea dreams, because you are somebody that's discerning enough to love tea. You'll have a lovely kind of fun time up and down the new beautiful staircase, which just built by Ben Pentreath, looks like it's always been there. Double helix staircase, such an innovation, and it looks like it has been there forever, and yet it was unveiled last week, I think, Chris, wasn't it?
It was.
So I think I think experience is always part of it. Expensive is the opposite of luxury as well, just to kind of come back on that point. But I do think an emphasis on how do we create that experience and make it incredibly meaningful and really resonate with the customer is a real priority if we're thinking about luxury marketing. How do you create that sense of huge allure, of resonance, kind of the idea that there is a temple that you can visit, the Macallan, make your pilgrimage to Speyside and see, Easter Elke's house and the gorgeous distillery, that would be the kind of pinnacle of it, or just go and learn about the product. The transaction is almost immaterial, and I think luxury marketing has remembered over the last few years, with this emphasis on experience, that the transaction will happen if you get the experience right. I also feel that there is we are all more mindful about consumption, which is why sustainability and luxury, as François-Henri Pinault says, are one and the same. Things that last are great from a commercial point of view. If every single thing that person buys lasts forever, then your business is not necessarily growing very fast. So can you create a kind of more beautiful experience, both as a kind of incentive and as a reward? It has to come as standard, but it has to be an extraordinary romance. Luxury is not a Tinder date where you're you're doing the equivalent of throwing your tea pigs into the Sainsbury's basket. It is a romance. It starts a very, very, very long time before you've even made your way to the product. And that is about experience. And it could be that there is no physical item. It could be that it is, going to, I don't know, for a beautiful dinner, or all the classic experience things. Well, but it is also retail fundamentally about experience.
I think as people have got wealthier, there's such a finite amount of possessions that they can physically own, and we have seen that the what's called the experiential luxury market has been growing faster than the physical luxury market in recent years, and that's why brands like LVMH are buying Belmont and moving into those areas. But I think what underpins it still is the quality of the product, because I love this quote from Alfred Dunhill, which is that quality is always cheapest in the long run. It gives it, the value equation a certain benefit, because if something does last longer, you're going to invest, in a good shirt, you're going to spend probably, £500 cleaning it over the years. So if you add that to the long-term value of the shirt is better than the Marks and Spencer one, you could argue.
I agree, and I think I think I agree with that, and I think at Fortnum's we do try. I think it can be tiny little things. What we know from our customers, the things that bond them into us in the greatest way, and the things that they're most appreciative of, can be really small things. We do put on really big experiences for people, and we do, we've got a whole floor now that focuses on experience, but still, honestly, some of the things that bind our customers to us the most are the tiny little things. So it's a bit of sampling on the floor, or one of my favorite social posts ever I saw when I just joined Fortnum's was somebody posting something along the lines of, it was a rainy day outside in Piccadilly. I nipped into Fortnum's for shelter, and a nice man in a red coat gave me a paper cup of champagne, and now I can never go back to my real life again. And I think, just there, all we did is give a sample of champagne to somebody, but it's just recognizing you and doing something nice for you, irrespective actually of whether you buy something or not. Of course, we would love you to buy something, but about 50% of people who come into Fortnum's then go without buying something. They come in just to see the building. We need to change that, clearly, but there's something that we concentrate on in the day-to-day running of the business before we get to bespoke experiential things, which is just being recognized. And it's the power of service and the power of good service in the widest sense to make you feel good. And as I say, happily for luxury brands, it can just be the power of being recognized or just sort of rewarded in a tiny little way that separates that day out from the rest of your week.
Chris, on that point, essentially you are, for those 50% of people who don't buy, is you're building basically brand love, brand loyalty, and future intention, and that's almost your brand campaign, I guess. You could evolve it to that. As much as I'm sure the chief executive would like to see 75% of people leaving with something.
But he wants to lock the doors, but we won't. But no, absolutely. I think we're big believers in Fortnum. No business, I think, can last. We've been on the same site for 318 years, and no business can do that without really investing in their brand and what their brand means to people, and the brand storytelling, as well as really investing everything we possibly can in the product. You have to do all of these things, but the brand is particularly important to us. And it was Michael's point earlier, you can't stay the same. You have to reinvent. We're again, I keep quoting things, but we were I was described with the business when I joined, was described to me as a 315-year-old startup, which again I just love, because it sort of encapsulates the attitude that we have, which is we have to come in every day and respect the heritage that we have, and not do anything to sort of trounce that. But we have to be thinking differently, and you have to have a blank sheet of paper each day and go, right, what could we do now to really surprise people and bring people with us? So I think you have to do everything and invest in everything slightly tiringly, but the brand is, I would argue, of course, as I run it, but the brand is as important as the product, I think, because if you get people to love you as a brand, then they're much more likely to come back, and they may not shop the first time, but they'll bring a friend and they will shop the second. So it's of huge importance to us, I think.
Building on that, I mean, Leslie, in terms of consumption habits of new generations like Gen Zs, how is that impacting on your attitude towards the brand, and what's happening in terms of their drinking habits? Are they different to their previous generations?
Yeah, so the Gen Zs and Millennials really represent a generational shift. And they have been reshaping expectations, not just in the drinks industry, but overall, as Helen was saying. They're constantly looking for authenticity. They want creativity, but they also look for those emotional connections. And that's why experiences are so important. They do, however, show a very, very strong affinity for luxury goods in general. So about 8% of Gen Zs and Millennials have a purchase intent towards luxury goods, which is really important. So, you know, it is definitely in their consideration. As far as drinks are concerned, they embrace moderation, but that there is this sense of a new hedonism. When they do drink, they really splurge into premium experiences. So it's just creating a brand world that will have an emotional connection, that will allow them to find what they're looking for in terms of the value equation. So is it relevant to them? And are we able to create stories that will then really ring a bell with that emotional connection? But they are drinking less, but when they do drink, it is a much higher expectation of a premium experience, and it's just not about the liquid. It is how do you actually experience within the wider context of the drinking occasion.
Thank you. Question from Julie Davidson, if I may read it for you, Julie, and thank you for your question. How do the panel see the role of celebrities changing? I've been interested to see the impact of Claudia's outfits choices in the Traitors on sales for small luxury clothing brands this week.
Do you want me to take that one?
Please, Helen, thank you.
I mean, on the big picture is that celebrities can be quite challenging for a luxury brand because the brand needs to be the celebrity, but influencers and fashions on celebrities can change quite heavily. However, that being said, if you want to prompt something quite quickly, or if you're then something like Claudia on Traitors is catnip, particularly if you're a small brand. You're quite right to point it out. The Princess of Wales internationally is the biggest kind of breaker of the internet for small British luxury kind of clothing and fashion brands. I mean, so many stories from our brand, Tomorrow Program, which is our kind of incubated fledgling brand, where she's worn a pair of shoes and it has crashed their site and they can't make them fast enough, and it's just opened up a whole new market. So it's important, but they should support the personality. That can prompt, if you're lucky with that, prompt purchase. But if you're going to choose a celebrity, it needs to support the storytelling of the brand. And I think Burberry are a really good example with the kinds of celebrities that they're choosing, or the famous people that they're choosing at the moment, because it's a really reflective of their narrative about what does modern Britishness mean. So that would be my 5 pence worth.
Thank you. I mean, Leslie, sorry.
What we also experience is in markets like China, where the role of influencers is enormous, and tapping into the power of the influencer, but also attached to that the cultural relevance that influencer will provide to the brand. So you hear that big advertisers like Unilever are shifting a great deal of their media monies into influencers. It's just there to demonstrate the power that this new channel really has. And as we look at cultural relevance in particular, and how influencers can play a role in that, it's important to remember that cultural relevance adds meaning and difference to a brand, and ultimately that is what drives the brand power and the brand equity. So being choiceful in how you partner with celebrities and how you partner with influencers is really important, because they need to represent your brand values. And you never know, there is a degree of risk and unpredictability when you work with influencers, as we have seen many examples all over the world. But especially when you think about luxury brands and the value of that equity and the need to be consistent across all the touch points. It is all about setting a framework and being quite strict in that framework, because your level of risk is extrapolated if you think about handing over your very precious brand values to somebody who is a little bit unpredictable. So I would just say that, operating within a very tight framework, but still adding a degree of spontaneity within that is a very tight rope, but it has been done. And as we've seen some good examples of Burberry recently, can be very, very powerful too.
And Michael, you could argue that Mandarin really was kind of ahead of the game in that respect, because it was an influencer campaign, even though you didn't know it at the time, because it didn't exist
before the web even existed, let alone social media or the iPhone. So yes, I think it was, well, it was partly because most luxury brands, unless you're particularly a French or Italian one, don't have the budget to really afford those key celebrities. And I think coming back to the point about authenticity and relevance to the brand is, if you have people who are genuinely fans of a brand, then that makes a much more lasting and enduring relationship. And to Leslie's point, we had the same consistency of one message, I'm a fan, running for 25 years across a number of different people who were not paid to take part because they were genuine fans of the brand. And I think, that's going to be a hard bar for another brand to beat, but let's see what happens in the future. But I totally agree that the need to have the personal relationship and managing that is a very important part, because the other option is you go for the guns for hire, and the problem for most campaigns is that people remember the celebrity, not the brand. So you've got to think about how you can actually use it in a way that is about building your brand rather than the profile of the celebrity you're featuring.
I think the authenticity there is, everyone said it, but that's a massive point. But also there's something really interesting about the way people feel about influencers. Again, this is a slightly obvious point, but they feel a closeness to them that they just wouldn't have felt if it was a broadcast campaign, even though effectively they are being broadcast to. There's a totally different feeling. And I think it goes back to sort of Helen's point earlier about just brands connecting with people in a way. You sort of need to lift the curtain a bit and allow people in. And I think influencers done well allow people to feel that's happening in a really impactful way, and allow people to feel more connection because of that sort of perceived connection and perceived authenticity. At Fortnum's, we run various things. We don't have the budgets to deal with mega celebrities, but we do get the great and the good of the food world into our place. And we do things like supper clubs with the best chefs in the world. And they're very intimate, and you can buy a ticket, you can come in and you can be cooked for by a chef who tends to have a new cookbook out. They'll make something. They literally are the best chefs in the world. And these things are really not expensive to do. And you're in amongst 30 people, and there's Q&As and stuff going on with the chef. And those things are incredibly popular because they bring people sort of behind the curtain a little bit, behind the pages of the book. And I think that as a guiding principle serves authenticity well. And I think that's why influencers done well, accepting all the potential bear traps that Leslie mentions, but when it's done well, that you get much more emotional connection and therefore much more brand love, I think, out of that.
Thank you. Well, but back to a few questions that have come in. One from Barry Fitzpatrick, which talks about obviously the importance of actually managing the brand experience across all touch points, and actually the ability to be able to deliver it physically at a touch point, as well as obviously the product and engagement, the consumer online, multi-channel, etc., etc., etc. I want to come back to a question, if I can, based on that for Leslie, which is, unlike Fortnum's, who can control that experience, for the vast majority of your sales, you're not in control. It's being delivered by somebody else, by a retailer, or it's actually, within a hotel or in a restaurant, whatever it happens to be. To some extent, you're losing control over that part of the experience. How do you, particularly on a kind of global basis, when you're dealing with lots of different cultures, how do you kind of balance that? How do you kind of achieve that? Is it through education? What do you do?
Well, not without a great deal of effort, Stephen, I have to say, but we have an army of advocates, brand ambassadors, and brand specialists around the world. and their role is to create consistency in the experiences, especially as far as brand education is concerned. And as we were talking earlier about storytelling, the consistency of the storytelling and what sets the Macallan apart from the entire industry, and the fact that those messages are not only consistent, but they have to be highly motivating. So what the Macallan has that is really underpinning the incomparable craftsmanship and authenticity is our mastery in sherry oak aging, and the fact that the Macallan owns the entire supply chain from the forest in northern Spain to the vineyards in Jerez, to the cask making, the cooperage, and the fantastic aging in Speyside. So the consistency in that story, which I described just in very short sentences, delivered in a motivational way, is what will then bring customers into the brand. And when you go through the trade and get the trade excited and motivated about telling that story, not experiencing the product itself, because we have such a fantastic range. You create a story, you create an experience, and you create a sense of personal discovery. And trying to own this entire chain takes on a lot of resource, but a lot of passion and a lot of pride, which is is a key part of being the Macallan.
So storytelling is at the heart of that, and soft education to kind of ensure that people are passing that on. Is there, Michael, this is one for you. Is there a danger that storytelling becomes Chinese whispers, in the sense that basically with AI, particularly now beginning to kind of involve itself and helping to power both creativity and being at the heart of storytelling to some extent, is there not a danger that we end up diluting that story and it does get mistold and the experience then suffers?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. One of our colleagues is in Saudi. So London Advertising, being a global advertising agency, we've sort of pivoted to create London AI as a way of helping clients understand how marketing and particularly strategy and creativity, which is not the strength of AI, can also be underpinned and supported by the many benefits of AI as an efficiency tool. But so one of our colleagues is in Saudi talking to a conference about luxury hospitality, and their sort of headline is all about how we can create customized AI avatars and chatbots to guide people through their Saudi tourism experience. And I'm going, no, this is completely the opposite way that they should be doing this. They should be using the AI to empower human contact between Saudi ambassadors or guest curators rather than replacing human interaction. And I think this is a really important lesson, particularly in the higher you go up the price point in terms of luxury, that what people want isn't more interaction with computers and digital devices. They want human interaction. And what I mean, I'll give you a very small example. That one of the clients who were looking at how to improve their operation efficiency, they had 5 people creating a newsletter. Now, the AI can do that, but what do you do with the 4 people who no longer need to be, doing the day-to-day part of that job? Well, you put them into customer service roles, so that people learn, your call is important to us. Please hold. No, get somebody to answer the phone and speak to them quickly. So these are the shifts that are happening, and I think luxury can be the sort of standard bearer for good practice of how we implement the benefits of this amazing technology in a way that's relevant to our customers.
Thank you, Michael. Chris, I mean, is it something that you are already working with at Fortnum's?
Yeah, I think we are, but I think there's, to Michael's point, it's sort of different speeds for different bits of the business. I mean, the restaurants is interesting because I think people come there obviously for amazing food, but also social connection and service and all of those things. And when it comes down to it, AI can't properly fillet a fish, at least not yet. But and it can't provide the ambience, and it can't provide the experience that a collection of committed chefs and waiters and waitresses in a beautiful room can. So I think, but of course it has a role. I think, as everybody knows, we're sort of building the plane whilst we're flying it, aren't we? And trying to work out exactly what that role is. But again, as Michael alludes to, I think it can be a great time saver for many things. And I think ultimately it will become a fantastic creative tool. But I think we're deep into it at the moment. Do we have all the answers? No, but we're scrambling as quickly as we can to make sure we're not left behind in this. But we're doing that with the distinct ambition to not let it take over stuff. I mean, I think people, again, obvious point, I'm afraid, but people's brains change less quickly than technology. And I think, I do think that AI is going to be fantastically useful and an amazing creative tool in so many ways. But it's an and for us. It's on top of great service. It's on top of an amazing building. It's on top of doing everything we can now to improve our website experience so that has echoes of Piccadilly more and is more involving. I think we need to do all of these things. AI ultimately is a sort of creative and logistical tool which we're going to use on top of everything else we do. Is our ambition. But it's fascinating topic and interesting times.
Yeah, and I suspect Helen will probably have an award next year for the best use of AI within the luxury sector or something along those lines.
Well, all of our awards were about artisanal intelligence this year rather than artificial intelligence.
Brilliant.
But but it's not an either or, it's an and, isn't it? So
It's an ad, yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it? It's a tool that if it can be used wisely, can actually enhance the experience and add value. But
and just
in the wrong hands, it can detract.
Just as I was saying a moment ago, Stephen, building those relationships through education and advocacy and having personal connections, they're incredibly valuable around the world. And you don't walk into a luxury hotel or a restaurant and you're just guided by AI. Our customers want the opinion of the head barman. They want to say that they prefer something fruity or something citric. It is that interaction that creates memories and adds an element of storytelling when the story is retold. It's all about the human connection, and we are seeing a great shift also with the younger generation of, yes, there is a role for AI, but it would never ever replace the human connection, even more so these days where it appears that this reliance on social and digital is coming to a limit now.
I think it can help you know your customers better. So, for example, somebody's staying at the Maybourne in London, and the AI has helped the concierge realize that this particular guest is really interested in contemporary art, and can then on a personal level deliver, there's a private opening at this gallery in Mayfair, I've been able to get a couple of tickets, would you like to go? The AI has actually empowered an immensely powerful personal connection.
We see a lot. I mean, I agree, Michael, we see lots of examples of that. It just needs to be incredibly invisible, but it is those kind of subtle things. So the peninsula, if you are used to staying at the peninsula in Singapore, and you like your lighting in your room a certain way, then without even realizing it, the lighting whenever you're staying at the Peninsula Hotel or wherever they are around the world in your room is kind of set on the setting that you'd kind of created for it when you stayed. So subtly you feel kind of, this is nice, this is recognized, this is how I like things. And in a way, that's what we want from luxury. We want to feel loved and recognized and kind of, as an individual. And so no fuss, no friction, nothing like that. But the bed's the way I like it, the lighting's the way I like it, that just those little signals are great. And you've got stores with extraordinary data. I mean, many stores have got and brands have got great data sets that they use to make the customer experience really easy. So, I mean, Harrods' data set on their customers goes back a very, very, very long time. They've made huge investments in their data science capabilities. It's seen as being the best data on that kind of very high-end international customer that exists. But they're able to predict what a customer So, for example, the oil price changes, and their data knows what happens with when what that means in terms of prompts to get new customers into the store. So they're able to then make sure that they've got the product in store that answers that. And then it picks up kind of really mad stuff like Jellycats. The next thing that people in the Harrods buying a Jellycat go and buy is an Hermes handbag. So kind of, I mean, weirdness too. So you'd want to do nothing weird. I mean, like, what do you do with that piece of information? But I mean, that kind of predictability of customer need. So it creates a very seamless, lovely, resonant experience, I think is quite helpful.
There's a good point here that's been raised about actually discretion and the fact that obviously high value customers, super high net worths, etc. Obviously, discretion is particularly important for them. It's important for everybody. But how do luxury brands use AI responsibly when protecting the sense of privacy and trust? And that I think is quite exciting and interesting at the same time. But one has to be very careful, isn't it? Particularly with open-ended AI and making sure you don't actually feed information relative to your customers onto it, God forbid. Other questions coming in. Matt Edwards, what trends are you seeing recently in the world of hospitality and experience? How are venues such as Soho House or Third Space changing the way they present themselves as luxurious? So there's been a lot written in the press in the last few weeks about Soho House and the group and overexpansion, etc., etc. Does anybody want to take that one?
I mean, I can talk a little about how we're seeing experience in our place. So I'll start there if that's useful. So, I mean, as I say, we try to concentrate on everything in Fortnum's being an experience, but we do have now on our third floor an entire floor dedicated to experience. We've got a working kitchen there. We've got even more excitingly, a working gin still there. We've got chefs there who you can come and communicate with. It's a much more experiential place. We do supper clubs there. We do master classes, and especially actually when you go down the generations, sort of Gen Z and things, what we tend to find, there's stuff that everyone knows that luxury is tilting a little bit to experience, but there's a real desire for knowledge actually from younger, it makes me sound very old, from younger generations, real desire for knowledge, and that can be just knowledge of what an incredible tea is that no one else knows, so they can bring that to a friend's house when they pop around, or it can be knowledge on how to make the perfect martini, or it can be knowledge on wreath making at Christmas, or it can be lectures on soil health. We've done all of those things at Fortnum. So I think it's sort of opening up, we're trying to make our brand confident enough, not arrogant, but confident enough to impart knowledge around things that we're passionate about and that we know. And that's going really well so far. The third floor is always busy, it's always full, and then you can obviously micro target at different groups depending on who you think would be interested in what. So I think that's a really, it's not a massively revolutionary thing. Soho House have always done talks and things, but we've sort of taken it to another level, I think, and got a whole floor dedicated to that. And that I think is really exciting for physical retail, because on top of all the other things I talked about and making everyone who comes in feel good about the visit and giving everyone something special to remember, I do think to be there for the next 320 years, we need to do something really different. So that sort of desire for knowledge is really interesting to me, and that's what we're trying to work with.
I agree. The kind of mindful over the material is a big. There are three things there. One is the mindful over the material. So you can't buy brains, but you kind of really want to learn and you want to know that. So, and I see in the very, very top end when I'm talking to my members who've got take case to the kind of the 1% of the 1%, they want to talk to a nuclear physicist or a kind of the astronomer royal, all that kind of stuff as part of their relationship with the brand. So brand is kind of curator of learning within the brand, but also outside it. I think that, and we'll see that continue to develop. And also from a younger customer point of view, it's back to that knowledge exchange. How do we have a dialogue as discerning equals? I think it's really interesting to look on TikTok and look at the knowledge that young people have. Young people, sorry, making myself sound like I only ever listen to Radio 3 and go to Wagner at Bayreuth or something. Anyway, so the knowledge of really kind of deep knowledge about the history of fashion brands. So, and like searching in vintage places for the 1997 chinoiserie look number 4 of John Galliano for Dior. So it's that kind of expertise in customer and thirst for knowledge. Second one is kind of health span. So think about third space. The wealthier you are, the more high affluent you are, the more highly realized you are. You want to live for a very, very long time. Obviously, some people take it to extreme, California tech bros. But this, how do you have a very healthy experience? So everything that you do as a brand needs to kind of live up to that in some ways. And we see lots of innovation in the kind of health space where health meets hospitality. And then the third basic point about Soho House, I think, is a point about scale. And this is where commodification and luxury are uneasy bedfellows. So you want to be managed scarcity is still a feature in luxury. It's got to be special. I need to have it as my discovery. I need my friends to know about it. I don't want it to be there for absolutely bloody kind of thing. And so how do you balance that as a brand? You need a bit of sleight of hand around it. And Soho House perhaps are not necessarily doing that currently in a way that could be.
I think that the phenomenon of Soho House overexpansion is partly an issue which I've heard so much of from luxury brands. Oh, we need to target a younger consumer. That is absolutely true. You need that pipeline of people coming through who have discovered your brand and aspire to it and will purchase it when they have the wealth. But if you're a luxury brand and you really want to sell stuff, you need people who can afford your higher price point. And the average people who have 1 million of liquid assets, which is the classic definition of a high net worth individual. Sorry, can't afford a round of drinks in a London bar, to Helen's earlier point. So you really need for those sort of higher end luxury brands to be talking about very high net worth people who have 5 million liquid assets beyond their property. And the average age of those people is 61. And then people say, but the boomers are all going to die and give, £2 trillion worth of inheritance to the millennials and Gen Z. Guess what the average age of those people will be when they receive that money?
Yeah, but look at there might be 61 in Europe, but they're not 61 in the Middle East, which is a huge market. US.
Helen, that is a global average, and you're right. In China, for example, the average age of a very high net worth individual is 51. But as a global average, that's the point. And yes, there are young people who have a job at Goldman Sachs and earn a lot of money, especially before they have children. Then they will stay at home. But there's only so many Soho houses you can fill with that lot. That's my point.
There's a question full of people like me. I would be very uncool.
Well, that's why I gave up on that. I couldn't go there any longer. I felt far too old. So, I mean, accessibility and sustainability in two subjects we haven't really spoken about today. Certainly, sustainability it is increasingly, obviously, part of most luxury brands' DNA, and if it is, and it needs to be, particularly when we go back to talking about our millennials and Gen Zs, but frankly also because it has to be. Can we just talk about accessibility of brands and actually the curation point that you made, Helen? And how do new luxury brands break into the marketplace? J4J has asked a question earlier on about how do luxury handmade goods, for example, get into partnering with organizations like Fortnum & Mason? How can they break through? How do brands break through in a very, very cluttered, complex, fragmented market?
I think it's much easier than it ever has been. I think because you can, if you're good and you're canny on social media, you can create an audience. You're going direct to consumer first anyway, and then you will want to be in Fortnum's because the positioning. Actually, Fortnum's is absolutely first class at going out to look for interesting, niche, beautiful, artisanal British luxury brands. I mean, Sabrina Savage has had her big break at Fortnum's, and that is, I think she's like the British Hermes for kind of Disney silk and cashmere and things like that. So it's not impossible. It's not I think the barriers to entry are much lower than we think they are. But if anybody wants a break and they've got a great little emerging luxury brand, apply for Brands of Tomorrow that we have, which is our incubator.
Brilliant, thank you.
Really,
Conscious that we're coming right up to the end of our call, unfortunately, but there's one question I want to put to all of you, and if you could each very quickly answer it in turn, if that's possible. And the question is, if you could redesign the luxury playbook for the next decade, what one principle would you keep, and what one would you discard? Leslie, sorry to put that on you.
I would think about it in the long term. So building equity and maintaining a degree of scarcity, as Helen was saying earlier. The moment you lose that sense of scarcity and desire, you are no longer a luxury brand. So finding the right balance between value, scarcity that would drive desire, and that normally calls for a long-term approach to whatever strategy you're putting together.
Thank you. Helen?
I think you must have an absolutely kind of like focus on your brand codes. That's, if you don't have your brand DNA laid down in this market where it's a conversation with a customer on as equals, and you want to collaborate with influencers, things like that, you will be dead in the water. So know who you are, stick to who you are, don't deviate. Would be what I would keep, and what I would lose is basically what Leslie's saying. It's kind of don't mess with the commodification thing. Don't chase growth for growth's sake, because you'll lose your soul.
Thank you very much, Chris.
I would discard expense and keep value, by which I mean don't focus on. Obviously, you need to focus on the cost of goods, but don't focus on inflated prices. Don't focus on sort of pricing for pricing's sake, and never ever value engineer at the other end of the spectrum. I think I genuinely believe if you concentrate on making a product that has real value to people, and you really focus on the materiality of that and the authenticity of it, then the sales will come, and then the problems will be solved. And I think starting on a spreadsheet is the wrong place to go. You have to be all in for the product, which is why, to Helen's point, actually, I think it is much easier now to get your products stocked within stores. We just did an open call at Fortnum's, inviting anyone and everyone to come and talk to us if they had a product, and it was fascinating. There's so much innovation out there. So yeah, discard expense and keep value.
Keep value. Thank you. And Michael, the last word?
Consistency. I think that's absolutely integral to everything that the rest of the panel said. So you can't keep changing. You have to have that brand DNA and apply it across all communication points Leslie was talking about earlier. The thing I get rid of is luxury brands who are doing dad dancing on TikTok. And I use that slightly frivolously to make the point that don't try and become down with the youth when you're not. You might be something that people discover and want. They aspire to the values that you have, rather than you trying to chase after them. So, unto thyself be true.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. Thank you for all of the people for coming and joining us today. So all of the viewers, but equally thank you for all of our panel. Fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it. We could talk for hours. Just 3 quick notices tomorrow night for those people who are lucky enough to be in the 30-something category. We have Club 30 Pimento, which is an event in London entitled No Plan, No Problem. BD Club, our next business development club, is on the 19th of November. The details there. And the 6 p.m. club goes to Glasgow next week. So we're in Glasgow on the 20th of November. If you happen to be around, you're all welcome. It's always a great evening. Thank you very much indeed, and hope to see you all very soon. And don't forget to go to Fortnum's, and don't forget to pick up your bottle of 15-year-old Macallan for Christmas. You know you want it. And please do look at all the fantastic work that Helen's publishing. And you know where Michael is. If you don't, just drop me a line. Thank you very much for joining us.